How do you choose the right bit for your horse? I'm going to go over 3 factors today. The first is understanding the type of the bit and how it's going to function when it's in your horse's mouth. The second is getting the right size, and this isn't just the length of the bit, but also the thickness of it and how that fits your horse. And the third is, how does your horse react to the bit? So first of all, let's talk a little bit about the different types of bits and how to understand their action. So a snaffle bit is one that works on direct pressure. This means it doesn't have any kind of a leveraged action. These are jointed snaffles, which means they've got this little joint in the middle. A bit that's straight through without this joint is a Mullen mouth. Now we can have different thicknesses. This is a thinner mouthpiece. We can also have different shapes. Notice this one is contoured to leave more space for the horse's tongue, where this, for example, is 2 relatively straight bars. They've got just a tiny bit of curve. We can have different types of metal. This is a copper versus just our stainless steel. And we can also have different textures. This one is smooth. This one has a bit of a twist to it. This one is really thick. So when we think about how this is functioning in the horse's mouth, generally the thicker the bit, the milder it's going to be because we've got a larger pressure area. However, some horses have a lower palate, just a smaller mouth, and if they don't have space for this bit, it's not necessarily going to be comfortable for them. When we have a bit that's got a texture to it, like this one's got a twist, that creates more of these concentrated points of pressure because it's not just smooth. So this one is potentially going to be a bit more harsh, if you will. We also want to look, even in our snaffles, the type of the side of the bit matters. So this is a D-ring. If we have something like a D-ring or a large full cheek, these are designed to create a bit of steering help, because if we're using direct pressure on one side of the bit, we're actually putting a little bit of pressure here on the cheek on the other side of the horse's mouth that is going to give us a bit more turning action of their head. So that exists with a big D-ring. It also exists with the full cheek. If we use something like a loose ring snaffle, you'll often see it used with these bit guards, and these are to prevent the bit from sliding through the horse's mouth because we don't have the longer side like these have. So before I move into the other styles, you may already be thinking, okay, so these are all the options. How the heck do I know what to actually use on my horse? So remember, there's 2 things to start with for fitting a bit. First of all, it needs to fit lengthwise. So you should have just a little bit of the bit showing in the corners. If your horse's, the corners of the mouth are directly touching here on the side, then the bit is too small. If it's at all looking like it's pulling the cheeks in, way too small. If you've got a big length of bit, more than 1/8 of an inch on the side, then it's too big and it's going to slide around. It also has to fit for the size of the horse's tongue and their palate. It's got to fit comfortably that they can have a comfortable closed mouth. If you have the bit in and you just pop open their lips and you see that their tongue looks like it's being squished, or if they're always opening their mouth, there can be other reasons for that, but if they're always opening their mouth, one of the reasons could be that the bit is just too big and they can't comfortably close their mouth with the bit in. Okay, so now we move to leveraged bits. Now a leveraged bit starts to have a different action because our rein attachment is down this shank. The side is called the shank. So then when we are using the rein, we're having a leveraged action because as I lift here, do you notice how that twists this side down? So well, we've got the headpiece going over the top of the horse's head. No matter what kind of bridle you're using, it's going to create a pulling action here at the top of the bridle, so at their pole. So as you're working the bit, you're getting a leveraged action. A lot of times these bits are used with a curb strap or a curb chain. So then you're also getting pressure up on the chin. So we've got pressure down on the head, pressure up on the chin, creates kind of a squeezing action. That is going to be more intense the more leverage we have. So the longer the shank, the more leverage there is. We can have also bits like this. Now this is our example of a bit that's got a bit of a port. These are also called curb bits. So it's a straight mouthpiece, it's not jointed, but it's got this little bump in the middle. What this can do, especially if it starts to get bigger, is it's actually touching the palate, the top of the horse's mouth, when we're using any of the leverage action. So even though this bit has these kind of sides, if we hook our rein down here, and this is called a Kimberwick, if we hook our rein down here, we're still getting the leverage action. If we hook our rein up here, we're getting very little leverage action. If we hook our rein here over the whole side, then we're also getting very little leveraged action. Kimberwick is also always used with a curb chain, typically, that goes underneath the chin. And then this is a Pelham, and this one is designed to be used with either two reins or with a converter. So when we're using this with two reins, then we've got a snaffle, we've got a direct pressure in one rein, and we've got this leveraged action on, it's called the curb rein usually. So on the lower rein that has this leveraged action. So this is for a more skilled and advanced horse and rider, as the communication can start to get even more precise and happen in very subtle ways with these different, now we've got two sets of reins that we can be giving signals with. So when you understand how a bit works, when you can look at any bit, it may be a style that you've never seen before, but you can say, okay, well, it's got a shank, so I know it's got leverage. I can tell by the size of the shank how much leverage it's going to have. I can look at my mouthpiece and say, okay, well, this is, this has or does not have a curve. Also with these jointed mouthpieces, when we're putting pressure on them, even the direct pressure, you've got to remember they've got more of a squeezing action, they call it like a nutcracker action, than a direct pressure down. So you're more squeezing this way than you are just like pulling down on the horse's tongue. If we're using a bit like this, now we're just pulling down on the tongue. So you understand how the action is. You can determine if the bit fits your horse simply by looking at it in the horse's mouth. And then you can start to ride with different bits and notice, how does your horse respond? Are there bits that they're simply more comfortable with? Some horses will prefer a sweet iron or a copper over just a stainless steel. The quality of the bit. A $20 bit is going to be made with lower quality materials, and therefore it's going to have a different taste in the horse's mouth than a higher quality and also more expensive bit. So test different ones, and know too that it's an option to ride without a bit. At the end of the day, I believe that any of our tools can be just that. They can be a tool for communication between us and our horse, or they can be an item of abuse. The same bit could be either one. So anytime we're putting something in an area that's so sensitive for the horse, like their mouth, we have to be really conscientious of what we're then doing with that tool, that we understand how it works and we understand how what we're doing is creating different pressures that send signals to the horse based on their prior training, but also just, some horses will really dislike a leverage bit that's putting pressure up here, and they won't react as much to a bit that is just maybe straight across and putting pressure on the tongue. So it comes with some experimentation. As always, being really observant and listening to the horse, and knowing that it's also an option to ride without a bit with the training, the right training, and the same type of exploratory mindset to find the right bitless bridle, because there's different styles of bitless bridles as well. We'll link to a resource for that. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something about bits and bitting. If you have any questions at all, put them down below. As always, you can find more horse riding tips, training advice, and all kinds of resources at horseclass.com.